It's time. It's episode 86, the ATM podcast. Me, Martin Devlin from the platform, Mark Watson, broadcaster, opinionator, and a man who has less tolerance than I do for Trent, Boult and Lockie Ferguson turning up late in the West Indies for the T20 World Cup and now complaining of jet lag. How bloody ridiculous is this, Mark? And New Zealand cricket, give yourselves an uppercut, because this is the ultimate tail-wagging dog, isn't it? This is a world championship event. And what, you can't be bothered even turning up on time?
No, look, this is, I keep saying it, you hear me every week, Martin, talking about the Players Association for Rugby and how the only people that are benefiting are, the players, and cricket's no different. So we've had 9 players in this T20 World Cup squad involved in the IPL. And then you've got Gary Stead coming out and saying, look, we're not going to play any warm-up games. We're only going to have the entire squad together 4 days out from our first game because we're going to allow these players to spend time back at home with their families because of the arduous time they've had to spend in India making their millions. It's just gutting. When are these guys actually just going to put New Zealand first? It's
never,
funny, they
mate.
come
never. Unless New Zealand comes in a wallet with green notes inside it, mate. That's all they care about.
But the disappointing thing is they've got no value without having played for New Zealand. So it's New Zealand that basically is the audition. And then through playing well for New Zealand, they suddenly end up making these $1 million contracts. And then they turn their back on New Zealand and they bite the hand that ultimately feeds. Look at New Zealand cricket. We can say we've been in 2 World Cup finals, but we've never actually won anything, have we? It's our second biggest sport behind rugby. It gets all the media coverage. It gets wall-to-wall coverage over summer. But what have we actually ever won? Yes, we can say we won a Test championship, but look, that was off the back of COVID when a number of Test series were cancelled. It was in its first year, and we ended up playing India in sort of New Zealand-like conditions in June. But really, when you look at it and break it all down, we've won nothing. We're the great underachievers. And do we really understand why? We're never prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. You can't go in and win a T20 World Cup with no warm-up games, with the whole team only coming together for 4 days because they're tired, because they want to go home and spend time with their family after having made their millions in India. It's just so upsetting. They all, Martin, and I say this genuinely, say this, I'm not just plain honest, but they all just need to go to a place like Gallipoli. They need to take a long, hard look at themselves. They need to understand what real sacrifice is. They need to understand what New Zealand means as a country. Look at that black thing. Look at young kids who just so desperately early on want to just represent the New Zealand, play in front of big crowds, try and go on and become the next Richard Hadley, the next Martin Crowe. And I think a lot of these guys, that, like all young kids, that is the driving factor initially, and then they get their head in the trough. Then they start to understand what money can do, and suddenly nationalism goes out the door. And I'm going to find it really hard to support this New Zealand cricket team, at this T20 World Cup. But we've seen it before. We toured England a couple of years ago, and guys like Kane Williamson are turning up 2 days before to play the first Test because they've been playing in the IPL. In the summer prior to that, he couldn't play Test cricket because he had a sore elbow. But conveniently, all of the elbow and injuries disappear when the IPL comes along. And look, Stead, New Zealand cricket, they're almost as gutless as New Zealand rugby.
Apologise to me!
Speaking of which, what happens now after the provincial unions gave the big finger to the RPA and said, no, we still retain and want to retain some kind of input in here, if not control. And I back them to the hilt on this, Mark. A couple of things. One, you can't tell me out of the 90 people that voted last Thursday, there's not at least 3 really good men or women who are qualified, more than qualified, to sit on any board in New Zealand that actually administers the game of rugby. Plus, then you've got part B to this, where Rob Nicol continually harping on about we need the 9 best brains in New Zealand. We need them not to be, to have commitments to other rugby. We want them to be fresh, to be think. Mate, we've already got independents, we've got business consultants, we've got marketing experts, we've got all of this bollocks on the New Zealand Rugby Board. And guess what's happened? Gender-enforced ideologies and quotas. And what has happened? It's been called not fit for purpose. I don't get what the thing is. You want 9 independents, Rob, but you've already got that mainly anyway, haven't you? And it hasn't worked.
Oh, Rob Nicol just wants power. Rob Nicol, I'll say this, Rob Nicol has been head of that Players Association since it was first established in, I think, 1999, so 25 years. Now, the only people that stay in jobs that long generally are dictators, in my opinion. I said this last week, there's an old saying by a French philosopher that the welfare of the people has always been the alibi of tyrants. And I think there is a level of that. This is all about power. The thing that keeps missing in all of this is the fan. We just never hear about the fan. As I've said, just like I said with the cricket, and you hear me say it every week, the only people that have benefited are the players, and it's got to stop. It's got to change. The provincial unions, they want to retain some power, but they've been on the board, and look at the state of the game at the moment. I think that Mark Robertson needs to resign. I think Dame Patsy Reddy needs to resign, but I also think too that Rob Nicol needs to resign. We need some change. We need some fresh thinking. We've got to bring some people in who don't have their own personal agendas and trying to somehow disguise and pretend that it's actually all about the greater good, when I think deep down it's actually all about themselves. The game's in real trouble, mate, and I'm just not sure what the solution is, how they're going to find a way forward. No, I've heard categorically that in 2026, the NPC is going to be put out to streaming companies and you're going to have to watch it on YouTube. I mean, that's how far the game has fallen. And they had a chance here. I'm not sure what the solution is, but you're right, Martin. I think too, when you start picking these board members, stop looking at the CVs, stop looking at the PowerPoint presentation. Look at people who are actually not afraid to upset the apple cart. Look at people who are actually got a clear vision.
Well, why don't you want people who understand rugby, who've worked in rugby their whole lives, to actually have some kind of input into the running of rugby? This is what I actually don't get. And also, it's a bit disingenuous of Nicol to suggest that, hey, we want the 9 best brains, because we can't get the 9 best brains, because 40% have to be women. There's got to be a rainbow representative, and on it goes. So if the 9 best brains just happen to be 9 blokes from the South Island, they can't get those jobs. I mean, this is the corner that they've painted themselves in now. Yeah. So what actually happens? What, is Rob Nicol really going to take the professional players and run away and start a new organisation? How does this end, mate?
Well, I don't know how it ends, but you're right. I mean, anytime you have this equity of outcome model, it's discrimination. It's discrimination against the best candidates, and this mentality that's been put in by High Performance from New Zealand that 40% of your boards need to be women is just absolutely ridiculous. It should, as you've heard me say, I don't care if it's 80% women, just have the best people.
Yeah. If it's 100% women, I'm happy with it, providing they are genuinely the 9 best candidates.
100% here. But look, when I hear Rob Nicol going, "Oh, we want the 9 best people on the board," it sort of reminds me a bit like Rob Nicol probably coming in and saying, "Well, I want religion taught in schools." Well, which religion? Well, my religion. Well, who are the 9 best people? Well, the 9 best people we think are the 9 best people.
That's exactly right.
Where does it stop? And I'll keep saying this. I mean, why do guys stay in a job for that long? Because it's power, mate. I mean, I've heard for a long time that the Players Association basically run the game already, and I think that is half the problem. I mean, the biggest issue for New Zealand rugby is always the financial side of it. It's always the bottom line. Where does a large chunk of the money? It goes to the players, 30-odd%. Doesn't matter whether New Zealand rugby end up losing money on an annual basis, they still take 38% of all the income that comes in. So they don't actually accrue any of the losses themselves. And I just go, look, and then at the same time, they're double dipping, because those same players then leverage off the back of what New Zealand rugby's done for them, turn their back and go on a so-called sabbatical. I mean, this is how much the players have manipulated. I just want New Zealand rugby to come out and have the balls and say, no one player is bigger than the game. If you want to be an All Black, you stay here and play. Now, I'd like to see them say you can play in any Super Rugby franchise.
Yeah, same,
whether
absolutely
it's in Australia,
same.
whether it's in Fiji, whether it's in Samoa, so you can spread it around a little bit. But the All Black jersey, if you want to be an All Black, you stay here and play. If you finish the World Cup and say, well, the only reason you're going to keep me here is because you're going to pay me $300,000 more than the $700,000 you're already paying me, go. If it's money that's going to keep you in the All Black jersey, go. I just want you to play for New Zealand because you love the damn jersey.
Apologise to me!